The hospital ship moved slowly through space, its white hull painted with large red crosses that could be seen from miles away. The UHSV Mercy was the pride of Earth's medical fleet. Inside, doctors and nurses worked in clean, bright rooms taking care of sick people from the mining colonies. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars. He was a tall man, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been running medical operations for 15 years. Behind him, nurses pushed patients on floating beds through the hallways. Some patients coughed with fever. Others had broken bones from mining accidents. Everyone on the ship wore white uniforms with red cross patches. Dr. Kate Sullivan walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad. She was the chief medical officer and had been treating a sick child all morning. "Jack, we have another 50 patients coming from the colony. Some kind of plague is spreading fast." Jack nodded. "How many beds do we have left?" "Maybe 200. We are getting full." Kate looked worried. "But we can manage. We always do." The ship carried 847 doctors, nurses, and medical workers. Down in the passenger sections, 1,200 sick and wounded civilians waited for treatment. Children cried in their mothers' arms. Old miners lay in beds breathing slowly. The Mercy was their only hope. Amy Carter was a young medical technician working in the lower decks. She had blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail and quick hands that never stopped moving. She was checking supplies in storage room 7 when the alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. Amy dropped her data pad and ran toward the nearest emergency station. Around her, other crew members did the same. Everyone knew the drill. But this was strange. The Mercy was in neutral space. No one ever attacked medical ships. It was against every law in the galaxy. On the bridge, Jack stared at his screens in disbelief. 3 large warships had appeared out of nowhere. Their dark hulls bore the markings of the Vraxian Confederacy. The Vraxians were an alien race that humans had been having problems with for 3 years. But there had been no real fighting. Just angry words and tense meetings. "Send the medical broadcast on all channels," Jack ordered. His voice stayed calm, but his hands shook. "Make sure they know who we are." The communications officer, a young man named Peter, worked fast. "Broadcasting now, sir. Sending our medical status, our cargo manifest, everything. They have to see we are unarmed." The Vraxian ships moved closer. They were destroyers, built for war. Their weapon ports glowed with charging energy. Jack could not believe what he was seeing. "This is the UHSV Mercy," Peter said into the microphone. "We are a hospital ship, operating under galactic medical conventions. We are unarmed and carry only sick and wounded civilians. We request safe passage." Silence. The Vraxian ships did not respond. Then they opened fire. The first blast hit the Mercy's forward section. The ship shuddered and screamed. Metal tore apart like paper. Air rushed out into space through massive holes. Alarms went crazy. People started screaming. Jack grabbed the command chair as the floor tilted. "Get everyone to the escape pods." "Now!" Kate was already running. She shouted orders into her communicator as she moved through the tilting hallways. Around her, nurses tried to carry patients toward safety. An old man fell from his bed. Kate stopped and helped him up, holding him as another blast shook the ship. In the lower decks, Amy grabbed onto a wall rail as the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, giving everything a red glow. She could hear explosions above her. She could hear people crying and calling for help. "This way," someone shouted. Amy followed other crew members toward Escape Pod Station 12. They ran through smoke and around broken pieces of ceiling. A young nurse was carrying a small child. Amy took the child from her so the nurse could run faster. The Vraxian ships kept firing. They were not just attacking. They were destroying everything. Every section. Every room. It was murder. Escape pods started launching from the Mercy's sides. Small metal spheres shot out into space carrying groups of survivors. Jack watched from the bridge as his ship died around him. He refused to leave until everyone else was safe. "Sir, you have to go," Peter shouted. "Not yet," Jack said. He was trying to count the pods, trying to know how many people escaped. Another explosion tore through the bridge. The blast threw Jack across the room. His head hit a wall, and everything went dark. Amy made it to an escape pod with 17 other people. They squeezed inside the small metal sphere. Amy was still holding the child. A doctor named Carl sealed the door and hit the launch button. The pod shot away from the dying ship. Through the small window, Amy could see the Mercy breaking apart. Huge pieces of white hull, with red crosses spun away into darkness. She could see bodies floating in space. She could see other escape pods trying to run. Then, she saw something that made her heart stop. The Vraxian destroyers were hunting the escape pods. They were shooting them down one by one. Small explosions bloomed in the darkness as pods were destroyed. People inside them had no chance. "They are killing everyone," Carl whispered. His face was white with shock. "Get us into those asteroids," Amy said, pointing to a nearby field of rocks. "Hide us." Now, the pod's small engines fired. They moved slowly toward the asteroid field. Behind them, the Vraxian ships kept destroying everything. Amy watched through tears as her ship and her friends died. She held the child close and recorded everything on her datapad. The pod slipped between two large asteroids and powered down. They sat in silence and darkness, listening to their own breathing. Outside, the massacre continued for another 20 minutes until there was nothing left to kill. When it finally ended, the Vraxian ships left. They jumped away into faster-than-light travel, like nothing had happened. Amy and the 17 people with her were the only survivors. 2,029 doctors, nurses, patients, and crew members were dead, murdered in cold blood while trying to help people. Amy looked at the child sleeping in her arms. She looked at her datapad with its terrible recording. She knew what she had to do. Earth needed to see this. Earth needed to know what happened. The galaxy was about to change forever. The news reached Earth 6 hours after the attack. Amy Carter's escape pod had been picked up by a human patrol ship. The recording she made was sent immediately to Earth Command. Within minutes, every screen on every human world showed the same terrible images. The Mercy breaking apart, escape pods being hunted and destroyed, wounded people floating dead in space, doctors and nurses burning, children dying while still in their beds. People stopped what they were doing and watched. They watched in grocery stores and offices. They watched in homes and schools. They watched and felt something cold settle into their hearts. This was not war. This was murder. In New York, President Richard Hayes sat in his office, watching the recording for the 5th time. He was a thin man, with steel gray hair and hard eyes. He had been president for 2 years and had always pushed for peace. He believed in talking and finding solutions without fighting. But this was different. His Secretary of Defense, Admiral Daniel Cruz, stood nearby. Daniel was a big man with dark skin and a scarred face from his years in the military. He had fought in small battles before. He knew what war looked like. "They knew it was a hospital ship," Daniel said quietly. "They saw the red crosses. They heard the broadcasts. They killed them anyway." Richard nodded slowly. "How many dead?" 2,029. Medical personnel and 6 civilians. Only 18 survived. Richard closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were different. Colder. "Call an emergency session of the assembly. We meet in 2 hours." The United Earth Assembly building was packed. Representatives from every human colony world sat in their seats. News crews filled the back rows. Everyone waited in heavy silence. President Hayes walked to the podium. He did not smile. He did not make small talk. He simply began to speak. 6 hours ago, the Vraxian Confederacy attacked and destroyed the UHSV Mercy. This was not a military ship. It was a hospital ship. clearly marked and broadcasting its medical status. It was unarmed and carried only sick and wounded civilians, along with medical personnel. He paused. The room was absolutely silent. The Vraxian commander, Admiral Krethvar, ordered the complete destruction of the Mercy. When our people tried to escape in pods, the Vraxians hunted them down and killed them. 2,029 human beings were murdered. They were not soldiers. They were doctors, nurses, and sick people needing help. Richard's voice remained calm and steady. But everyone could hear the anger underneath. This was not an act of war. This was genocide. This was a violation of every civilized law in the galaxy. The Vraxians have crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. He looked directly at the cameras. I am giving the Vraxian Confederacy 48 hours to surrender Admiral Krethvar and every officer involved in this attack. The Vraxians will also pay full reparations to the families of those murdered. Richard leaned forward slightly. If they refuse, Earth will respond, and our response will be absolute. The Assembly voted. The vote was unanimous. Every single representative voted yes. Humanity would go to war if needed. Across human space, the military began to move. But it moved quietly. Ships changed positions slowly. Merchant vessels rerouted. Nothing looked unusual yet. At Vraxian High Council chambers, the alien leaders watched Richard's speech. The Vraxians looked like tall insects, with 4 arms and hard shells. They clicked and hissed as they talked to each other. Council leader Vrextal found the whole thing funny. The humans dare to threaten us? We have the 3rd largest fleet in the galaxy. What do they have? A few dozen warships? Dare. They seem very angry, one council member said nervously. Let them be angry, Vrextal said. Anger means nothing without power. The humans are soft. They spend too much time talking about peace and helping others. They play at being civilized while real powers like us control the galaxy. The Vraxian Council sent their response. Their spokesperson appeared on every major news channel across the galaxy. He was a tall Vraxian general named Krixval. The Vraxian Confederacy will not bow to human demands, Krixval announced. The ship that was destroyed had entered a contested zone. Admiral Krethvar acted within his rights. If the humans want their admiral, they can come and try to take him. Then Krixval made a mistake. He laughed. The humans are weak creatures who spend their time saving sick people instead of building proper weapons. They should stay in their own space and stop pretending to be a real power. Back on Earth, Admiral Daniel Cruz watched this speech with his senior staff. Vice Admiral Lisa Monroe sat to his right. She was a brilliant tactician with red hair and cold blue eyes. Next to her was Commodore Kevin Wright, a young officer known for his strategic thinking. Admiral Brandon Cole from Naval Intelligence completed the group. They think we are weak, Lisa said. Good, Daniel replied. Let them think that. Let them be surprised. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Kepler sector. Dozens of points lit up, showing ship positions and military installations. We have been preparing for this moment since first contact with the Vraxians, Daniel explained. We hoped it would never come, but we were ready just in case. Daniel explained. Brandon Cole added information to the display. Intelligence has located every ship involved in the Mercy attack. We know where Admiral Krethvar is. We know the command structure. And Decayment, Admiral Krethvar is. We know their defenses. Kevin Wright smiled slightly. It was not a nice smile. Operation Righteous Fury is ready to launch on your order, sir. Daniel looked at each of them. When we move fast. Surgical strikes only. Military targets only. No civilians. We are not here to conquer or destroy. We are here to deliver justice. Understood? They all said together. Begin Phase 1. Get our ships in position. Make it look like we are just moving units around nervously. Let them think we are scared. Around the galaxy, Other alien species watched the situation carefully. Most of them were disgusted by the attack on the hospital ship. Several species sent quiet messages to Earth offering support. Others stayed neutral but made it clear they would not help the Vraxians. The Vraxians noticed none of this. Admiral Krethvar gave interviews on Vraxian news channels. He wore his medals proudly and smiled as he talked. "I taught the humans a lesson," he said. "They needed to learn their place in the galaxy. Now, they know not to challenge us." His fellow officers celebrated him as a hero. They drank and laughed and planned their next moves. They talked about how weak humans were, how easy it would be to take human colonies if they wanted. None of them noticed the countdown. Earth had given them 48 hours. The clock was ticking. On Earth, President Hayes stood at the memorial wall in his office. It listed every human who had died in service to Earth. Soon, 2,000 new names would be added. Names of doctors and nurses. Names of sick children and wounded miners. He thought about his speech, about how calm he had stayed. People needed to see that strength. But inside, Richard felt the same fury every human felt. The Vraxians would learn what they had done. They would learn that humans protected their healers, that some lines should never be crossed, and they would learn it soon. The Vraxians did not see it coming. They were too busy celebrating to notice the changes happening around them. Human merchant ships continued their normal trade routes. Or at least, that is what it looked like. The large cargo vessels moved slowly through space, their holds supposedly filled with grain and manufactured goods. Vraxian patrols scanned them lazily and let them pass. Those patrols never looked close enough. Inside, those cargo holds were not goods but weapons. Missile pods, fighter craft in pieces, equipment for marine units. Everything was hidden under false floors and behind fake containers. Captain Eric Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched his crew work. Eric was a short man, with broad shoulders and a square jaw. His brown hair was cut military short. He had joined Earth's Navy 20 years ago and worked his way up from ensign to captain. The Retribution was humanity's newest dreadnought. She was 2 kilometers long, with armor 3 meters thick. Her weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. While other species focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, humans had developed something else. "Status report," Eric said to his second officer. "All systems green, Captain. Mass accelerators at full charge. Kinetic batteries loaded. Point defense grid active. We are ready." Eric nodded. The mass accelerators were his favorite weapon. They were simple in concept. Take a solid piece of metal and throw it really, really fast. When something hit another ship at a large fraction of light speed, shields did not matter much. The kinetic energy alone would tear through almost anything. The Retribution was part of Battle Group Hammer. 41 capital ships working together. They had been drilling together for months under the cover of routine exercises. Now they waited in a staging area just outside Vraxian sensor range. On another ship, Commander Ryan Foster prepared his team for a very different kind of mission. Ryan was tall and thin, with dark skin and calculating eyes. He ran Shadow Squadron, Earth's Black Operations Unit. Shadow Squadron did not exist officially. They had no names on any roster, no records in any database. They were ghosts who appeared only when Earth needed something done quietly. Ryan's mission was simple on paper, but hard in practice. Find every ship and every officer involved in the Mercy massacre. Tag them with tracking devices. Gather intelligence. Be ready to grab them when the time came. His team had already infiltrated 3 Vraxian military bases. They moved through alien territory wearing stolen uniforms and false identification. They spoke the Vraxian language perfectly, thanks to months of training. Lieutenant Amanda Brooks was part of Ryan's team. She was a specialist in close combat and infiltration. She also had a personal reason for being here. Her sister had been a nurse on the Mercy. Amanda had seen the recording of her sister dying. She would never forget it. Target is moving, Amanda whispered into her communicator. She crouched on a rooftop overlooking a Vraxian spaceport. Below, Admiral Krethvar's flagship was being refueled and resupplied. Copy that, Ryan's voice came back. Plant the tracker and get out. Amanda moved like smoke. She dropped from the roof and crossed the landing pad in seconds. Two small devices went onto the flagship's hull. They were smaller than coins and impossible to detect with normal scans. They would let Earth track Krethvar no matter where he went. She was back in the shadows before anyone noticed. Back at Earth Command, Commodore Kevin Wright worked with dozens of tactical officers in a huge operations room. Holographic displays showed every Vraxian military position, every base, every ship, every supply line. Intelligence from Shadow Squadron and other sources updated the displays constantly. Kevin was young for his rank, only 32 years old. But his mind worked like a computer. He could see patterns and connections others missed. He had planned Operation Righteous Fury down to the last detail. Timeline, Admiral Daniel Cruz asked. Entering the operations room, Kevin pulled up a new display. All pieces are in position. Battle Group Hammer is ready. Shadow Squadron has located all primary targets. Support fleets are standing by. We can begin operations the moment the deadline expires. Daniel studied the displays. 48 hours had become 40 hours. Then 36. Time was running out for the Vraxians to surrender Admiral Krethvar. No one expected them to actually do it. What about civilian casualties? Daniel asked. 0 projected, Kevin replied confidently. All target selections have been triple-checked. We are hitting only military installations and units directly involved in the Mercy attack. Civilian population centers are marked as no-strike zones. Vice Admiral Lisa Monroe joined them. The Vraxians are still not taking us seriously. Their fleets are in standard defensive positions. They think we might try a small raid at most. Daniel almost smiled. Almost. Good. What about the other alien species? Most are staying neutral, Lisa reported. But several have quietly offered support. The Koresh are letting us use their space for transit. The Tellan Union has shared intelligence on Vraxian defensive systems. Everyone is disgusted by the hospital ship attack. Even species that normally competed with humans for influence found the Vraxian action unacceptable. There were rules to war. Lines that civilized beings did not cross. The Vraxians had crossed one of the most important lines. On the Vraxian homeworld, Admiral Krethvar prepared for another interview. He wore his dress uniform covered in medals. He practiced his speech about the glory of Vraxian military might. His security officer, a younger Vraxian named Threx, entered the room. Admiral, some of our analysts are worried about human ship movements. Krethvar waved one of his forearms dismissively. Let them move their ships. Let them waste their fuel. The humans are afraid. They are trying to look strong, but everyone knows they are weak. But sir, the number of ships. Enough, Krethvar snapped. I have an interview to give. The entire Confederacy wants to hear about my victory. Threx said nothing more, but he was worried. Something felt wrong. The humans were too calm, too organized. It reminded him of the old hunting saying, when the prey stops running, it means the trap is ready. At a human colony near the border, the local militia received strange orders. Evacuate all civilians from the outer settlements. Move them to the core worlds. Make it look like they were scared of Vraxian retaliation. The militia commander, a woman named Karen Mills, understood what was really happening. Earth was clearing the board, making sure no civilians would be caught in what was coming. She had been in the military before retiring to colony life. She knew what these kinds of preparations meant. How bad is it going to be? Her deputy asked. Karen looked at the evacuation orders again. At the military units being quietly repositioned. At the supply stockpiles being moved. Bad, she said. Very bad. But not for us. The 48-hour deadline approached its end. All across human space, people watched the countdown on their screens. In homes and bars, in offices and schools, humans waited to see if the Vraxians would surrender Admiral Krethvar. No one really believed they would. The Vraxians were too proud, too confident. They had made their position clear. They thought humans were weak. President Richard Hayes sat in the Situation Room deep under Earth Command. Around him were his military advisors and key government leaders. They all watched the clock count down. "Any change from the Vraxians?" Richard asked. "No, sir," Admiral Daniel Cruz replied. "They have not responded to our demands. Their military remains in standard positions." Admiral Krethvar just finished another interview bragging about the attack. Richard's face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. "Then, when the deadline expires, give the order." "Yes, sir." The clock reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every human military ship across the sector went dark. Their identification transponders turned off. Their running lights died. They disappeared from sensors. The Vraxians noticed. Alarms started going off at their monitoring stations. Confused officers tried to figure out what happened. Where did all the human ships go? Quote, "They would find out soon enough." In the operations room, Admiral Daniel Cruz spoke 4 words that would change the galaxy. Execute Operation Righteous Fury. The attack began at exactly 3 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Across 17 star systems, human warships appeared out of faster-than-light travel simultaneously. Captain Eric Stone gripped his command chair as the Retribution dropped into normal space. Around his ship, 40 other capital vessels did the same. They had arrived directly inside a Vraxian military staging area. Vraxian alarms screamed. Warships tried to power up their shields and weapons. They were too slow. "All batteries, open fire," Eric ordered calmly. The Retribution's mass accelerators spoke first. Projectiles, the size of cars, launched from the ship's spine at incredible speeds. They did not glow or flash. They were just dark metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit the first Vraxian cruiser, the shields barely slowed them down. The projectiles punched through armor, through bulkheads, through everything. The cruiser broke in half and started spinning away, atmosphere venting from massive holes. Around the Retribution, other human ships fired their own weapons. Kinetic batteries released swarms of smaller projectiles. Energy weapons that operated on different principles than Vraxian technology cut through defensive systems. In the first 30 seconds, 12 Vraxian ships were destroyed. Vraxian 4th Fleet is trying to form up, Eric's tactical officer reported. 70 ships total. They are powering weapons. "Target their flagship first," Eric said. "Then work down the command chain." The 4th Fleet was considered the most powerful in the Vraxian military. It had never lost a major battle. It lasted exactly 42 minutes. Against Battle Group Hammer. The fighting was brutal but one-sided. Human weapons technology had developed differently because humanity had been isolated for so long. While other species built up their energy shields, humans perfected kinetic weapons. While aliens focused on plasma cannons, humans made mass accelerators that turned solid metal into unstoppable projectiles. But the humans were not mindless destroyers. Commodore Kevin Wright watched from Earth Command, coordinating all strikes across multiple systems. His tactical displays showed every battle in real time. "Vraxian Supply Depot 3 has civilian workers," one officer reported. "Strike is cancelled," Kevin replied immediately. "Mark that location as no touch. Find the backup target." This was not about revenge. This was about justice. Every target had been carefully selected. Only military installations. Only ships and officers involved in the Mercy massacre. Civilian targets were completely off-limits. In the Kepler system, Commander Ryan Foster and Shadow Squadron executed the most dangerous part of the operation. They boarded Admiral Krethvar's flagship during the middle of a space battle. Ryan led 12 operators in powered armor. They attached to the ship's hull using magnetic clamps and cut through the outer armor with plasma torches. Inside, they moved fast through corridors full of surprised Vraxian crew. "Contact left!" Amanda Brooks shouted, dropping to one knee and firing her weapon. 3 Vraxian soldiers went down. The humans moved past them without stopping. They fought through 5 decks. Ryan's mission parameters were clear. Capture Krethvar alive. Capture any other officers involved in the Mercy attack. Kill, only if necessary, to complete the mission. Krethvar's elite guard tried to stop them. They were the best Vraxian soldiers, trained for close combat and fiercely loyal. It did not matter. Shadow Squadron had trained for this specific mission for weeks. They knew the ship's layout better than the crew who lived there. Amanda kicked open a door and threw in a stun grenade. The flash and noise disabled everyone inside. She went in fast, weapon ready. Admiral Krithvar stood in the center of his command room, all 4 arms reaching for a weapon. "Do not move," Amanda said in perfect Vraxian language, her weapon pointed directly at his head. Krethvar looked at her. At the human soldier who had fought through his entire ship. He saw something in her eyes that made him freeze. It was not just determination. It was personal hate. "My sister was a nurse on the Mercy," Amanda said quietly. "She was carrying a wounded child when your ships fired. I saw the recording. I saw her die." Krethvar's hands slowly moved away from his weapon. He clicked and hissed, the Vraxian version of swallowing nervously. "You are under arrest for war crimes," Amanda continued. "You will stand trial for the murder of 2,029 human beings." Ryan entered the room with 4 other operators. They secured Krethvar with restraints and began gathering the other officers. Within 20 minutes, Shadow Squadron was back on their insertion craft, with all targets captured. Outside the ship, the battle continued. Human forces systematically disabled or destroyed every Vraxian military unit that had participated in the hospital ship attack. Some Vraxian captains tried to surrender. Those ships were boarded and their crews taken prisoner. Others fought to the end. Those ships were destroyed. Lieutenant Chris Martinez worked as a tactical officer aboard the Retribution. He was a young man from Mars with quick reflexes and a talent for reading battle patterns. He watched his displays, tracking targets and friendlies. "Captain, the Vraxians are starting to pull back," Chris reported. "Let them go if they were not involved in the Mercy attack," Eric replied. "Our mission is not to destroy their entire fleet. Just the units that committed war crimes." This confused the Vraxians. They expected humans to try to destroy everything, to conquer territory, to take revenge on all Vraxians for what some had done. Instead, human forces kept to their precise target list. A Vraxian destroyer that had been in another system during the Mercy attack found itself surrounded by human ships. The Vraxian captain prepared to die fighting. Instead, he received a message. "Vraxian vessel, this is Captain Eric Stone of the UES Retribution. You are not on our target list. You may leave this area safely. We have no quarrel with you." The Vraxian captain could not believe it. "Why spare us?" "Because you were not there," Eric replied simply. "Because you did not participate in the massacre of sick and wounded people. This is not about destroying Vraxians. This is about justice. For specific crimes." The Vraxian captain thought about this. About human mercy, even in the middle of war. He ordered his ship to leave the battle zone. He would remember this moment for the rest of his life. The war continued for 3 days. Human forces struck across Vraxian space with surgical precision. They destroyed 70% of the Vraxian military. But it was always targeted. Always specific. Military bases were hit, but nearby cities were untouched. Warships were destroyed, but cargo vessels were allowed to pass. Officers involved in war crimes were captured, but regular soldiers were offered the chance to surrender. The Vraxian High Council watched their military collapse in real time. They watched and finally understood their terrible mistake. The humans were not weak. They had simply been patient. restrained, diplomatic. The Vraxians had mistaken kindness for weakness. Council leader Vrixtal sat in his chamber watching reports of another battle lost. His confidence was gone. His pride was broken. Around him, other council members argued and panicked. "How are they doing this?" one council member demanded. "Where did these weapons come from? This technology? They developed it in isolation," Vrextal said quietly. "While we built our fleets based on galactic standard designs, they built something different. Something we had no defense against." "What do we do?" another council member asked. Vrextal knew the answer. It was the same answer he should have given 3 days ago. The same answer he should have given when they first attacked the Mercy. "We surrender," he said. "We accept their terms. All of them." The war ended not with more fighting but with a trial. Earth established an interstellar court on a neutral space station. Judges from 7 different alien species volunteered to hear the case. The proceedings would be broadcast across the entire galaxy. The courtroom was simple but dignified. Rows of seats for observers faced a raised platform where the judges sat. On one side stood the prosecutors from Earth. On the other side sat the defendants behind a transparent barrier. Admiral Krethvar sat with 47 other Vraxian officers who had participated in the Mercy attack. They wore restraints and plain gray uniforms instead of their medals and military dress. Krethvar stared straight ahead, his forearms folded. He showed no emotion. The prosecution was led by a human lawyer named Helen Park. She was a small woman with black hair and sharp eyes. She had prosecuted war crimes cases before, but never one this large. Never one watched by billions across the galaxy. "This trial is not about revenge," Helen began. "It is not about humans versus Vraxians. It is about whether civilized beings follow the rules we all agreed to. About whether medical ships are safe. About whether healers are protected." She pulled up the recording from Amy Carter's escape pod. The entire courtroom watched in silence as the Mercy broke apart. As escape pods were hunted down and destroyed. As wounded people died begging for mercy. Many observers turned away or covered their eyes. Several of the alien judges made sounds of distress, even after seeing it multiple times. The video was hard to watch. Amy Carter was called as a witness. She walked to the stand slowly, her hands shaking. She was still thin and pale. She still had nightmares about what happened. "Tell us what you saw," Helen said gently. Amy took a deep breath. "I was in the lower decks when the attack started. We tried to evacuate patients. There were children with broken bones, old people with radiation sickness, pregnant women. Everyone was sick or hurt. We were carrying them to the escape pods." Her voice cracked. "We made it to a pod. 18 of us got inside. Through the window, I watched the Mercy die. I watched my friends die. I watched the Vraxian ships hunt down the other escape pods and destroy them one by one." She looked directly at Krethvar. "I watched a medical pod full of children get shot. They were just kids. Sick kids who needed help. The Vraxians blew them up and then moved to the next pod." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Amy wiped tears from her face. "I held a little girl in the escape pod. She kept asking me where her mother was. Her mother was a patient on the Mercy. I had to tell her that her mother was dead. That all of them were dead." Helen let Amy's words hang in the air. Then she asked, "Did the Mercy fire any weapons?" "We did not have weapons," Amy replied. "Hospital ships are not armed. Everyone knows this. We broadcast our medical status on every channel. We showed them the red crosses on our hull. They knew what we were." The defense tried to argue that the Mercy had been in contested space. That military necessity required the attack. That it was an unfortunate accident. Helen destroyed each argument with facts. She showed logs, proving the Mercy was in neutral space. She showed communications records of the broadcasts that were ignored. She showed that the Vraxians had systematically hunted down escape pods, proving it was no accident. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses testified about international law, about medical conventions, about what every civilized species agreed was forbidden. Experts explained why hospital ships must be protected, why healers cannot be targets, why some rules exist that everyone must follow. Finally, the judges delivered their verdict. The lead judge was a Tellan named Vorath. He was an old alien who looked like a large bear covered in blue fur. He had been a judge for 40 years and seen many trials. Never one like this. This court finds Admiral Krethvar and 47 co-defendants guilty of war crimes, Vorath announced. Specifically, the intentional destruction of a medical vessel, the murder of protected medical personnel, and the systematic execution of wounded civilians attempting to escape. Krethvar showed no reaction. He had known this would be the verdict from the moment human soldiers captured him. The sentence, Vorath continued, is life imprisonment. The defendants will serve their sentences on a human penal colony. Their duties will include working in the medical facilities, caring for sick and injured prisoners under the supervision of human doctors. This was worse than death for a proud military commander. To spend the rest of his life as a medical orderly, doing the work he had destroyed others for doing. To serve the humans he had tried to destroy. It was a punishment perfectly designed to fit the crime. The Vraxian Confederacy accepted additional terms. Their military was reduced to defense-only forces. They could have no offensive capabilities for 20 years. They had to adopt strict medical protection laws into their core government. And they had to provide reparations to the families of those killed. But Earth demanded one more thing. Vraxian medical ships would spend the next 50 years responding to humanitarian crises anywhere in the galaxy. They would save lives to balance the lives they had taken. They would become healers instead of destroyers. President Richard Hayes addressed the galaxy once the trials ended. He stood in the same spot where he had declared war weeks before. But now, his message was different. Justice has been served, Richard said. But justice is not enough. We must ensure this never happens again. Therefore, Earth is proposing the Mercy Doctrine. He explained the new policy. Any species that attacked medical ships or killed medical personnel would face immediate response from a coalition of forces. Not just Earth. Any species that signed the doctrine would respond together to protect healers. 63 alien species signed the Mercy Doctrine within the first week. More joined every day. The galaxy had watched the trial. They had seen the evidence. They had decided that some lines must be protected by everyone. Captain Eric Stone attended a ceremony in orbit around Earth. A memorial had been built from pieces of the Mercy's hull. 2,029 names were carved into the metal. Each name represented a life lost, a healer murdered for trying to help people. Eric read through the names slowly. Doctors and nurses, medical technicians and support staff, patients who were just sick, people needing help, children who would never grow up, parents who would never see their families again. A new ship floated nearby. Another hospital ship, also named Mercy. This one was bigger and better equipped. It carried defensive shields and escort ships. No one would ever destroy a hospital ship so easily again. The new Mercy's captain was Lieutenant Kelly Morrison. Her father, Commander Jack Morrison, had died on the original Mercy. Kelly had chosen to follow in his footsteps, to honor his memory by healing others. They died saving people, Kelly said, standing next to Eric and looking at the memorial. That is what I will remember. Not how they died, but what they died doing. Eric nodded. Your father was a good man. He got a lot of people to the escape pods before the end. I know, Kelly said quietly. And I will make sure no one forgets them. Quote, Admiral Daniel Cruz stood in his office later that day, looking at casualty reports. Earth had lost 127 service members in the conflict. Every single one had a name. Every single one had a family. Every single one would be remembered. The cost had been high. But the message had been sent and received. Humanity protected its healers. Humanity followed the rules. But humanity would also enforce those rules when others broke them. The galaxy was different now. Species looked at humans with new respect mixed with caution. Earth had proven it was strong. But more importantly, Earth had proven it was just. It had destroyed military forces but spared civilians. It had pursued war criminals but offered mercy to regular soldiers. It had shown that strength and morality could exist together. Amy Carter visited the memorial every week. She would stand and look at the names of her friends and colleagues. She would think about the little girl she had held in the escape pod, about all the people who died that day, but she also thought about what came after, about the trials, about the mercy doctrine, about the new hospital ship, ready to save lives. Something good had come from something terrible. That did not make the deaths right. But it meant they were not forgotten. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans were not warlike or aggressive. They preferred peace and helping others. But there were lines that could not be crossed. And anyone who crossed those lines would answer for it. Some lines were worth defending with everything you had.